24/7 to get our area restored. More info at jea.com/storm.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, could a financial impact statement dissuade voters from supporting Amendment 4? We talked to two experts about its impact. Later in the program, we continue our local election coverage in a discussion with Duval County School Board District 1 candidate Tony Ricardo. Then, a nonprofit devoted to helping human trafficking survivors marks its 13th year in Springfield with a celebration and expansion. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or X. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address Congress today as the war in Gaza rages. That's despite ongoing negotiations for a ceasefire backed by the White House. NPR's Aya Batrawi has this report on conditions in Gaza.
NPR producer Anas Baba visited Nasser Hospital in Gaza. He saw it packed with severely wounded people and families who've just walked a mile or more, fleeing another Israeli offensive on southeast Gaza. Israel's military says Palestinian militants had fired rockets from the area and that its offensive is aimed at Hamas, the group that attacked Israel on October 7th. 14-year-old Dua Abu Jamia is sheltering in the hospital on the floor with her mom beside her. She says her family fled eastern Khan Yunis on Monday with only the clothes on their back, no tent to sleep in, or any food. She saw bodies on the road of people killed trying to evacuate. The hospital says 110 people, more than half of them women and children, have been killed by Israeli fire in Khan Yunis since Monday's offensive began. Aya Batrawi, NPR News.
President Biden will give a speech tonight from the Oval Office. He's expected to discuss why he chose to end his re-election bid. A group of anti-Trump voters who supported former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley in the Republican primaries is responding to a cease and desist letter from Haley. It demands they stop using her name. NPR's Sarah McCammon reports the group is now backing Vice President Harris.
The Political Action Committee, Haley Voters for Harris, was formerly known as Haley Voters for Biden. It was set up to encourage former Haley supporters to vote for the Democratic nominee instead of former President Trump. Fox News reports that Haley sent a letter to the group demanding it stop using her name. Craig Snyder is the director of Haley Voters for Harris.
Ambassador Haley's made it clear that she's joined the Trump train, and that's her prerogative. But the voters that voted for her are going to make up their own mind.
After initially declining to endorse Trump, Haley ultimately backed him and encouraged her supporters to do the same. Sarah McCammon, NPR News.
Scores of wildfires are burning hundreds of miles of land across the Pacific Northwest. From Oregon Public Broadcasting, Christian Fodenvenzel reports they're burning under record-breaking dry conditions.
A heat wave, a series of lightning storms, and human activity have set more than 60 fires ablaze across Oregon and Washington. U.S. Forest Service spokeswoman Holly Craig says some national forests have had 75 days without rain, and fire season runs for another 3 months.
So this is really shaping up to be a monster fire year across the Pacific Northwest.
While temperatures are expected to cool by the end of the week, the lack of moisture means forests and grasslands are likely to remain critical for wildfire. For NPR News, I'm Christian Fodenvenzel in Portland.
This is NPR.
It's now 4 minutes after 9. This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. A Duval County jail inmate was found unresponsive in his cell yesterday after spending several months behind bars, according to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. 46-year-old Timothy Elwin Wright was arrested in late January after police say he violated his probation for a lewd and lascivious exhibition charge. Wright was found incompetent and was waiting to be moved to a mental health facility. Florida and other states with dangerous levels of heat are requesting a lot more temporary migrant farm workers. Jessica Mazzaros reports.
Employers in Florida doubled their request for foreign agriculture workers between 2017 and 2022. It grew from 25,000 workers to over 50,000. Stephen Hubbard is the senior data scientist for the American Immigration Council.
When we look at Florida in particular, we notice that there was over 20% of workers worked in conditions where the heat was over 90 degrees or hotter, which produces, of course, illnesses.
Governor Ron DeSantis signed a law this year preventing cities and counties from creating heat protections for outdoor workers. Hubbard says employers are requesting more workers because a labor shortage is affecting the nation and many industries, including agriculture. I'm Jessica Mazzaros in Tampa.
It's mostly clear and 80 degrees here downtown in Jacksonville. Low 90s for this afternoon. Storms after 2.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a closer look at Amendment 4, the Right to Abortion ballot initiative. We discuss a new financial impact statement and that some say could sway voters and potentially defeat the amendment itself. Later, we continue our local election coverage in a discussion with Duval County District 1 School Board candidate Tony Ricardo. But first, what is typically a routine financial assessment of any ballot initiative has become politically charged in the battle over Amendment 4, and it could be politically consequential as well. To talk about what the financial statement says and what it means, we're joined by Dr. Nancy Statz, Vice President of the Jacksonville National Organization for Women. Welcome, Dr. Statz.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Daniel Cronrath, Dr. Daniel Cronrath, political science professor at Florida State College at Jacksonville. Welcome.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Daniel, the state does financial statements for all of its amendments, typically a fairly boilerplate process. First of all, this is required by law. Tell us about that requirement and why this particular instance of this financial assessment seems different.
Yeah, typically with every one of the amendments that are put on, whether they're put on by the legislature or whether they're put on by citizen initiative, they're going to be measured by a committee in Tallahassee, which is supposed to be apolitical, rarely is apolitical any longer because of the nature of our partisan politics, both nationally and in Florida, of course. But the whole idea is to give the voter, when they go in, an idea of what they're voting for to amend the Florida Constitution. Where will there be a significant fiscal impact? Sometimes you'll even see no fiscal impact as the result of it because it's something that would not have a monetary consequence. Okay, what we're seeing with Amendment 4, at least in my opinion, is not a financial impact statement, but an editorialization and a very, very political one. Basically, you're putting the amendment. Obviously, everybody who is behind the Amendment 4 campaign, the Vote Yes for 4 campaign, we know what the legislation says. It's very, very basic. It's basically, at least from what I understand, going back to the Casey versus Planned Parenthood standard, that that abortion prior to viability of the child would be legal in the state of Florida and available for everybody. The language which is contained to, like I said before, which is very much political language, talking about that somehow, federal funding or state funding would be used to perform an abortion, or somehow that this would create abortion, in which I'm sure that Dr. Statz can talk to at greater length. It's really kind of nonsensical. And then the whole idea of speculating what the cost of future lawsuits may be. Well, I mean, who has that crystal ball? Like who knows what's going to come down the pike that you're going to be including that kind of language? And I think finally, Ian, the thing that probably disturbs me the most is that Floridians enjoy this opportunity to have direct democracy. Not every state in the United States has the ability to do ballot initiatives like we do. And the whole idea that the legislature and that the governor, once again, is going to try to not post the election. Now they're going to try to preemptively determine what the outcome is going to be.
Well, let's talk about the process here a little bit. So there's something, as you mentioned, the Financial Impact Estimating Conference, and they meet to draft this financial impact statement. It's something that is required for any ballot initiative, and the makeup of appointee changes, but it is an appointed board that does have some political inclinations.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, remind us what about Amendment 4, what it provides and how it came into being in the first place.
So, as you may or may not recall, Amendment 4 was born once the 15-week abortion ban came into play. That was May, I believe, of 2023. And literally, the people of Florida decided we need to get a ballot initiative on this because we knew that the 6-week ban was imminent after that. So there was in excess of 1.2 million or so petitions gathered in order to qualify to put this on the ballot. It is an extremely straightforward amendment. It explicitly removes any changes to the parental consent portion of abortion. And after going before the Supreme Court, it was decided this language was appropriate and could be placed on our ballot.
And so the language says, except as provided in Article 10, Section 22, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. So this statement, this amendment will be accompanied by this financial statement. And I just want to read a little bit about that because it includes their assessment. This financial impact estimating committee determined, it says there's uncertainty about whether the amendment will require the state to subsidize abortions with public funds. They concluded that it will negatively impact the state budget if it's approved, and it would result in an increase in abortions that could negatively affect the growth of the state and local revenues over time. That's a lot to calculate. But in part, Daniel, they're looking at other states where there has been a financial impact of some kind or an anticipated financial impact of some kind with a change in abortion laws. And I think particularly one of the commissioners cited what's happening in Michigan, where there's been a push to fund through Medicaid, required abortions. So they're calculating that.
Well, sure, but you're not allowed to use federal dollars for abortion. I mean, that's been on the books in Washington, D.C. for a very, very long time. I think the big issue here is that if you consider those arguments and what you just raised in terms of people who are opposed to Amendment 4, then that is for a private group to put that out in private literature or to basically push against the individuals who want to get 4 passed. There's an open, competition of ideas in our political landscape. You are very, very welcome to vote no on 4 if you choose to vote no on 4. What the real problem is here is to put it right on the ballot and basically lay out in very, very loose terms a lot of things, again, which are very hypothetical. We don't know if these things are going to play out. We let the voter decide. We let the citizens put this on the ballot to begin with. Let the voters decide without what at least to my way of thinking, is very much political rhetoric designed to defeat the bill, to defeat the amendment.
And so politically speaking, I mean, this is your wheelhouse. How do you anticipate that it will impact a voter at the polls?
Well, it's very interesting. Some people are going to go in there and they're going to see the language and they may be confused. In my experience, whenever you've had an issue, which, again, I think the last time I looked at public polling, this is somewhere like right around the 59%, 60% threshold, so it's going to be very, very close. Sometimes decisions like this have the opposite effect because it's really going to energize the people who are for Amendment 4. They're going to realize that what's taking place is not only do they want to vote for 4, but they recognize the unfairness of this process, trying to deliberately influence the electorate prior to the vote. I think at the end of the day, there's going to be other things. A lot of people have speculated, will Amendment 4 and will Amendment 3 actually have down ballot pressure at the top?
Remind us what 3 is.
The legalization of marijuana. These
Okay.
are the 2 big high-profile things. I think, however, we can't ignore the national politics going on right now, too. What will Vice President Harris, now becoming the nominee for the Democratic Party, We've already seen a surge in Democratic activism. We've already seen a massive surge in Democratic fundraising. I think that when you're looking at Democrats who are typically pro-choice, they believe in abortion rights, I think that this could actually be a top-down ballot aid to Amendment 4.
Nancy, how do you anticipate this will impact voters? Is it seen widely by people who support the amendment that this will hurt its chances? It needs 60% of the voters to approve it to become law.
It is a high threshold, Ann, higher than any other state. Most states are at 50%. What I would say is I'd love to get back away from the speculating and into the actual facts of how abortion bans affect all of us. And Floridians are smart enough to know this is the real facts are that states with very strict abortion bans have higher maternal mortality. We're seeing it in Texas already. We've seen a 13% increase in infant mortality in Texas. We see lawsuits in states with severe restrictions against the state because of lack of access. So to speculate that there will be, as Daniel said, a change in the federal funding or the state funding, like this legislature is going to pass that? Does anybody really believe that? Floridians are smart. They're going to see this for exactly what it is. They have calculated huge what-ifs without looking at the actual costs.
Well, we're talking about a new financial impact statement that's going to accompany Amendment 4 on the November ballot. I've got a couple of calls I want to get to, but first a comment from Brian on X. He says that reeks of desperation on the part of opponents. Also, it assumes that abortion services aren't covered by insurance and are more expensive than, say, heart surgery or chemotherapy. Charles on the West Side. Good morning, Charles. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Good. Yeah, good morning. Question I had is, can we send out some sort of a mailer to the registered voters and also a TV ad campaign that answers or addresses this language in real simple terms, saying, hey, folks, it's a manipulative trick. Don't fall for it kind of deal?
Well, Charles, good question. I mean, there obviously are going to be a lot of resources put behind Amendment 4, not just from people inside this state, but nationwide. It's a big issue.
Well, sure. And I would say to the caller, I would say, Charles, I mean, I would be, at this point in time, the last time I looked at the fundraising, I think the folks who are in favor of Amendment 4 have raised $20 million. You're going to probably seeing that, Charles, if you're a super voter in your mailbox coming up to the election day. That very kind of disinformation that you're asking be dispelled. I would be stunned if that wasn't going to be, especially as we get closer to the November election. I mean, I know that our politics feels like it's moving very, very quickly, but we're still just at the end of the July. And I think as you get closer to September and October, that you're going to be seeing all kinds of literature. As a matter of fact, I just saw an ad the other day for Amendment 3 already starting up, from the individuals who want to legalize cannabis in the state of Florida. So, I mean, I think Dr. Sachs would probably be better, equipped to talk about what the plan would be if there is a plan. But, certainly you're going to be able to see a lot of counter information to what they're attempting to do.
And we should say, we're covering local elections that are pertinent to the August 20th primary. We'll be covering all of the ballot initiatives closer to November when those will be voted on. But this very issue is timely because this financial impact statement was just approved. Nancy, it seems a little bit ironic because the supporters of Amendment 4 were in fact the ones that pushed for a revised financial summary. I mean, there had been a financial summary in place. After the 6-week ban went into effect in May, they said the financials have changed. We should have an updated statement. And that's what opened the door for this one that they now have take issue with.
Correct. It does feel like a retribution, frankly. This, as your other guest has pointed out, this should be a straightforward calculation. There is no mystery to what this costs to have the previous circumstances reinstated. We have years of precedent. Prior to the ban, we had almost 50 years of abortion legal through viability. So we know exactly what it costs. It's not that much, especially when you consider the cost in maternal mortality, infant mortality, the drop in medical residents coming to our state, to say nothing of health care and medical care for mothers with problems or babies with problems or foster care. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but this very myopic view of the cost is based on just fantasies.
And also too, I think the thing that's just stunning is the number of people who will then engage in self-harm in order to terminate their own pregnancy rather than having it safe and legal and available. Exactly. Women have been terminating pregnancies for thousands of years in all kinds of ways which are disastrous to their own bodies. And I think that's another consequence that we need to look at, as you suggested, beyond just the simple finances.
That's a great point.
So we know that these meetings were contentious. They lasted many, many hours over several days of discussions. The Amendment 4 supporters had proposed language that would have said the amendment will, quote, result in decreased costs to state government with no impact to local government revenues or costs and an overall positive impact to the state budget. Nancy, were those arguments that you're discussing in terms of the cost of infant mortality or viability, for infant mortality or maternal mortality raised as potential costs?
So I'm not familiar with what they based those arguments on, but I think any rational thinking person can accept the fact that the cost to the state, who does not pay for abortions, and the federal funds can be used when it's cases of rape or incest or the life of the mother, which is not frequent. So we're not paying for them. The idea that paying for potentially a child up to 18 years or a complicated pregnancy, it pales in comparison. And this is, again, just fallacy.
We've got a call from Rick on the north side. Good morning, Rick. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I just want to ask a just simple question. Hypothetically, if both bills pass with yes on 3 and 4, in layman terms, what does that actually mean? That'll be my question. If both bills are passed with yes, what does it actually mean? Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Well, that's a really good question, Rick. One of the things that we've also seen in the past is we've had amendments pass in Florida that after the fact, they've actually tried to manipulate the outcome of the amendment. The restoration of felon voting rights is the first one that comes to my mind when we got rid of the whole idea of having to go to Tallahassee and beg for clemency to get your voting rights back if you had been released from prison for a nonviolent crime after 5 years. And then they decided that even though this was not in the language of the amendment, that individuals had to completely pay their restitution prior to getting their voting back. That's not what the Florida voters approved. That's not what it said in the amendment language. So I am sure after the fact, we've already heard the governor say things like he's opposed to Amendment 4, obviously because he's very, very pro-life and his constituency's pro-life. He's very, very opposed to legalized marijuana because he's concerned that the language isn't specific enough with how to regulate it. So I think that after the fact, you're still going to see, even if the voters go and both of these amendments pass, I think you're still going to see potential manipulation. And let's be honest about this, too. Governor DeSantis has never stopped running for president. A lot of these issues that he's still pushing are very popular with his base because he has designs to run in 2028. And I think that's some of what we're seeing. And that's why they're being so aggressive with it.
We've got a message from Melissa on Facebook. She says, this is horrible. Amendment 4 will kill women and children. No to 4. This ballot initiative is circumventing legislation. It's only 2 sentences. It allows abortion for any reason, for even minors, all the way up to birth. Talk about that. Nancy.
This Amendment 4 does not allow for abortion up until the time of birth. I was a practicing anesthesiologist for almost 30 years. I've worked in hospitals, clinics, at many different circumstances. There has never been an elective termination of a child that is viable. The reason we use viable, meaning able to live outside the womb, the reason we use the term viable is there are sadly some pregnancies which are never viable. And so to arbitrarily give a week really diminishes the medical facts that we're trying to use when making decisions. So there was a recent case of a woman who had a child with an encephalocele, which is when the brain, part of the brain develops outside the skull, which has about a 10% survival rate, however, not long-term and mostly with a lot of disabilities. She could not terminate her pregnancy. She was in Texas. She sued. And the problem is by forcing women to to carry that pregnancy to term, it could affect her long-term fertility and her life. And what have we gained? What have we gained? This goes against every bone in my medical doctor body to help people and to prevent pain and suffering. So if you care about life, you should care about the life on both sides of the placenta.
And I think there's been a lot of political effort as well to really look at the abortion scenario, and you'll hear a lot of really, really conservative individuals, I mean, literally using the word infanticide relative to abortion rights. And as Nancy has said, that's just so not the case.
I do want to go back, though, to Melissa's question about, this allows for abortion for any reason. Is there any reason that there should be no reasons applied to this law? I would say abortion opponents probably think that there's certain circumstances that they would accept abortion legality and others that they wouldn't.
So what this amendment states is that abortion is legal for those aged 18 and older, or for those 17 and younger with parental consent, up until the point of viability. And that's exactly what we had for nearly 50 years. And it really didn't cause a lot of problems. So we don't have to speculate about what if. And in fact, in half our country, that is the law of the land, that it is legal until viability. And it's the states that are pushing these extreme bans that are losing out on young employees. They don't want to come here to a state that has these extreme bans. And young residents in medicine, they don't want to risk losing their license after spending 10 years getting trained up. And now you tell me I can't treat this woman who's got premature rupture of membranes at 19 weeks, and I have to decide, am I going to risk my future? It is so short-sighted, and politicians do not understand the ramifications of these kind of broad laws.
Yeah, and I think just to restate it, just in a different way, if you're 14-year-old or if you're 15-year-old were to get pregnant and were to want an abortion, this Amendment 4 does not give them that ability without parental consent.
Correct.
That is a decision that will be made between your child and the parent up until the age of 18.
We have a message from Kelly on Facebook. She says, no on 4. The wording is deceiving. Both have terrible wording, not defined, and will cause lawsuits. What do you think about that, Daniel, in terms of the potential for litigation? Is that just to be expected?
It's going to be expected anyway. I mean, you could draw up the language any way you want, and individuals who are pro-life or individuals who are against legalized cannabis or for Amendment 3 are still going to file lawsuits. I mean, that's going to be inevitable.
Doesn't the fact that the Florida Supreme Court has to sign off on the language in some ways prevent that from happening, or no?
No, I mean, it'll still be tried in court. But you're exactly right. A conservative, completely DeSantis-supported Florida Supreme Court has already signed off on this language. I mean, the language is legal. It's not as if it's not illegal. But I think the other thing here, which is really, really interesting to me, is you may recall when the Constitution Revision Commission placed a whole bunch of amendments on the ballot with the last time that they met. And, of course, that panel meets every 20 years to discuss changes to the Constitution. And they actually gave Floridians an amendment that said, do you want to ban offshore oil drilling and vaping inside? And nobody was walking around then saying, what do these two things have in common? How is this not vague? How is this not, completely nonsensical that you would basically be putting, both of these things in the same amendment? The language for 4 is, as Nancy suggested, it's very, very clear. You may not like the idea of a woman being able to choose. You may not like the idea of going back to what we've had previously for 50 years in the state of Florida. But in terms of, ambiguity in the language, that just doesn't hold water for me.
We've got another question from Facebook. This is from Holly, and she says minors are allowed to have, under this law, allowed to have abortions without parental consent, just notification. Can you clarify what that provides for if this amendment were passed?
I have to look at the language exactly, but I believe it states explicitly that this does not change that element of our current law. It explicitly carves it out and says this
I'll give you a minute to
affect.
look for that.
Yeah.
And Daniel, just to ask you, I mean, we know that polling suggests people support abortion rights nationally and on the state level. How much of this amendment is an effort to kind of animate voters, and how much of it is a reaction to Florida's 6-week abortion ban that's currently in place?
I mean, I think that obviously the 6-week abortion ban has been very much a catalyst for the Amendment 4 movement. I think that when you're really talking about going from 15 weeks down to 6 weeks, I mean, not to get into basic biology, but many people who are pregnant don't even realize that they're pregnant at 6 weeks. I mean, and then and let's just talk about this. This is something that I hear too, Ann, and I know this is a little bit of a pivotal way that you've said. When we're talking about exceptions for rape, specifically, how many cases do you know for rape that are convicted within 6 weeks of the accusation? You know, to basically say you need to prove and you need to demonstrate that you were the victim of rape prior to receiving your. I mean, my goodness, the investigation doesn't even conclude in 6 weeks. Not to mention the process through the courts. So that whole idea of that, well, we've carved in this exception. It's not an exemption. I mean, it's not a practical exemption at all.
Well, and I think one concern that people who support Amendment 4 have raised is very often if you're talking about a young person who is pregnant for a non-consensual circumstance, very often it's a family member that's the perpetrator. And so, you know, attempting to get someone to file a police report in that circumstance can be pretty complicated. Nancy?
So the exact language is, this initiative would not change the state legislature's authority to enact a law requiring the parents of a minor to be notified if their child is seeking an abortion, with exceptions that can be attained through a judicial waiver. And furthermore, this does not change any other aspect of Florida statute. So the requirement that a physician must administer either an abortion procedure or medication, that stands. The requirement of having 2 visits to a physician at least 24 hours apart, again, no other procedure requires this. That still stands. Everything else that is pointed out in Florida statute is not changed by this initiative. This initiative changes the legality of abortion up until viability, and making it illegal and criminalizing physicians will not eliminate abortions.
I see my producer sent language that's on the state website that says this amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. And so if this passes, Nancy, the legislature would still have that freedom to require that.
It's required.
And this is important to note. That could have happened if Amendment 4 actually said that, but it does not. That language is not contained within the amendment. Therefore, that legislation as it exists, Florida statute exists, it will stand.
I'm going to take a call from Judy in the Beaches. Good morning, Judy. Go ahead.
Good morning. My call is this, question is this. I think statistics and polls have shown that a majority of Floridians support this amendment across both lines, and no party affiliates, Republicans, Democrats, by, the petitions that were signed. So what can Floridians do now to ensure that this amendment is passed, and that once it's passed, that it isn't chipped away by our legislature? I can take my comments off the air. Thank you.
I'd say make sure you vote and take a bunch of your friends to vote if that's the way you feel, because that's really the only way is to really get spirited. I'm sure there's ways, if this was important to you, that you could get with the organizations who are supporting Amendment 4, including now, that there would be phone banking opportunities and door knocking opportunities and things along those lines that you can help spread the word. Sometimes some of the most powerful communication when it comes to politics is person-to-person communication. And if you're really want to see this cross the finish line, and to pass is to get activated.
Well, Daniel Cronranth, Nancy Stotts, thank you both so much for being here. I know it's an issue that we'll be revisiting closer to November, but I appreciate all of your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ann.
Up next, we continue our primary election coverage. Fort Caroline, Heckscher Drive. It is a district that is desired to be represented by Tony Ricardo. I'm joined by him now. He is a candidate for Duval County School Board District 1. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me here.
So describe to us what that district looks like in your mind and why you want to represent it.
The Fort Caroline and Arlington areas are very much already developed, but the north side, the far north side, seems to be underway. It's in development. And so there's a lot of new building and a lot of infrastructure that's not built in yet for quite a bit of the area. But it's more rural.
How is that going to impact the way that children are educated in that district with that growth?
Well, part of the issue here, I guess, is the schools building and I guess populating the schools. I don't think that a lot of the master plan facilities has taken into account the new building that's going on the North Bank. And so we may be closing schools that will shortly be overcrowded.
What is it about, what appeals to you about being a District 1 school board member? Why do you want to sit on that dais and
Yeah,
work
I've been
on
asked that a lot. Yeah, so, as a former teacher, I've taken interest in educating. There's nothing like being an educator and seeing that light go on in the students' eyes, And so I really have enjoyed what little bit of time I did spend in the classroom. But also as a parent, I took interest in the educational process of my kids. And I'm really disappointed as a business owner at seeing some of the kids that are being produced by our school system that are not capable of holding a decent job because the skills aren't there.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. You, as you say, were a former teacher. You
Mm-hmm.
taught art. You've gone on to own your own art business.
Yes.
And how? But you weren't a teacher for very long. Is that true?
6 years in the public school system.
What was that experience like for you?
It was varied. It was very enjoyable. I loved the classroom. I loved the instruction. Of course, it was an elective, art. I taught art, photography, video production, those kind of things. And this is before 1992. So the technology is quite a bit different now.
A lot has changed.
Yes, it's all obsolete. So we're talking about, instructing the children and just giving them the opportunity to improve their skills, improve their self-awareness, improve their self-esteem in a lot of cases. I also taught or coached sports there while I was there.
Mm-hmm. And you've also painted, I think, a number of high school mascots?
Yes.
Any
Huge
that we would
number.
recognize?
There's a few here, but I think they're probably sanded off by now. Those things only last about 10 to 12 years.
Okay.
And I've been doing this for like 30.
So you are facing Dr. Nadine Ebry in the August 20th primary, which is close upon us.
Coming right up, yeah.
We had her on recently. This seems, out of all of the school board races, perhaps the most stark in terms of having one candidate that appears to be very conservative, one candidate that appears to be fairly progressive. So what do you have to say about your opponent and her plans versus your plans for the district?
Well, kudos to her for her classroom and her classroom experience in the technology. There's no personal agenda here. I do respect her for her achievements. I just believe that some of these, programs that she's endorsed or supports is just not productive for students. It takes away from their instructional time and unnecessarily makes the teacher's job a little tougher in the classroom. And, we just need to get back to basics.
And what kinds of programs that she supports concern you particularly?
I believe the DEI initiatives and some of the other things like that, they're just, if they're racial quotas, then and trying to, address the kids by a proper pronoun, it takes away from the classroom instruction time. It's unnecessarily distracting, and it takes away from a lot of the instructional ability the teacher has to do.
One of the things that Dr. Ebry raised when she was here was concerns about who is endorsing you.
Yes.
And I just wanted to run through some of those endorsements.
Sure.
The governor, Ron
Yes.
DeSantis, has endorsed you.
Yes.
Former city councilman Al Ferraro
Mhm.
and current councilman Mike Gay.
Yes.
Moms for Liberty.
Right.
The Fraternal Order of Police, the Duval County Republican Liberty Caucus,
Right.
and Stand for Jacks.
Right.
Those organizations, some of them very high profile, all of them fairly conservative. How do you describe yourself politically?
Well, I've been a lifelong conservative. I've voted conservative since 1978. First time I could, vote. I've been a conservative. I just have a conservative view on life in general. I've lived my life that way, and this is the first time I've run for a office of any kind. So, it's just we have a lot of things in common. The people that support me have the same viewpoints, and I've gone out and raised support through grassroots efforts. So these are people who we all align in the same views.
I'm talking to District 1 Duval County School Board candidate Tony Ricardo, and he's here to answer your calls and questions. You can reach us at 904-549-2937, or you can email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social media. We have a message on Facebook from Holly. What are concerns Tony has seen with Duval County Public Schools?
What are some of the concerns? Well, the one that got me into this race, I guess the final straw was the school books, the inappropriate school books in the classrooms or in the libraries where minors could reach them. So these are sexually explicit books, which 20 years ago, if an adult would have put books of these kinds in front of a minor, they would go to jail. These are, state offense. So I had a problem with that. And the biggest problem was when the parents of these kids went back to the school board and read back these books to the school board members. They shut the mic off on the parents. And, a representative government can't operate that way.
I've talked to a number of people, particularly people younger than myself, who have pointed out that the textbooks they were required to read when they were in school are now the same books that are being removed from the shelves.
Okay. Well, that's fair. I've seen a couple of classics that are on the list, and I'm not saying that they're banned. Okay, that's a mischaracterization. The books aren't banned; they're just removed from the minor's view. It's kind of similar to the convenience stores back in the day when they took the adult magazines and put them behind the counter, where they'd have to be accessed by adults, not minors.
And that's even if it's a classic, as you say.
Well, I'd have maybe exception with some of the classics, just because they are classics.
We do know that, for instance, Shakespeare has been a target of that removal.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're talking about Shakespeare being taught in high school level, not sixth graders and or fourth graders.
Mm-hmm. We've got a couple of calls. I want to get to William on the south side. Good morning, William. Go ahead.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Terrific.
Just fine.
Great. I have a question. I'm being an art teacher. I'm a retired teacher from Duval Schools, but I had a question concerning what your idea or opinion or impression is of the governor cutting about $70 million from the budget that would have gone to supporting the arts across the state of Florida. And this is very disingenuous because it stops opportunities for students that are artistic, that are creative, from being involved in these activities that are used for self-expression and education. So I wanted to get an idea of what you thought about that and what your ideas are.
Thanks, William. I mean, not explicitly a school question, but...
Right. So I'd have to take a look at it because that's a state issue.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from the governor's office. That doesn't really have anything to do other than we're operating with less money for the arts.
Do you support a more artistically
yes. As a former art teacher, of course, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've got a call from Cindy in San Marco.
Hello?
Good morning, Cindy. Go ahead.
It was on Facebook you made this post. Explain that quote to me. Why there is opposition to DEI agenda. It is based on a false idea. And is he saying that DEI is based on a false agenda and idea?
Thanks, Cindy.
Yes. So I think I'm all for diversity, okay? As a person who is of Cuban descent and my mother was Japanese, I would have to say, if it really worked, Miss Embry would be dropping out of the race because if you look at the school board, if you're a proponent of DEI, you look at the school board and how it's represented, there are no Hispanics and there are no Asians on that board. So you want to apply DEI, you'd have to take a look at that.
You're talking about for you personally.
Yes.
Yeah. But what about it? I think she was wondering more generally whether you believe that is a problem.
I think it is if you're taking up a lot of time, instructional time, trying to address these issues, whether or not you have so many blacks or so many Asians or so many this or that or whatever, you're just you're equating your success level to just skin color.
Got a call from Tiffany on the north side. Good morning, Tiffany. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My question is, as you represent, if you are elected, as you represent District 1, and you will, of course, exclusively represent the students and the families, how will you also ensure that as a board member that you keep in mind that you are also representing all of the children and the decisions that you make will not just impact District 1, but those decisions will also impact all of the children and families? How do you plan to, with your conservative views, ensure that you continue to do that as a board member, represent all children?
Thank you, Tiffany.
I'm not sure how my conservative views are going to make a difference in one district or another. I believe in accountability and spending, that the money we are asked to give to the schools is spent wisely. I believe that there are certain districts that need a little bit more attention. We have older school buildings in certain districts, and there's different problems facing each district. I'm familiar with several of them. I'm most familiar with District 1 because I've spent so much time there. But I've realized that my representation is for my district first, and then the entire school system also.
We've got a call from Yasmina in Arlington in District 1.
Yes.
Go ahead, Yasmina.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I've seen some concerning posts surrounding the LGBTQ community. How do you plan to support those communities of students in DCPS holistically, considering your views?
Do you mean posts by Mr. Ricardo?
Yes.
Okay.
If you could be more specific with the post, that would help.
Can you, Yasmina, be more specific?
Well, there are several posts in regard to being against the LGBTQ community. I would say specifically at Cotton's Barbecue, you stated you won't be returning because of gays and lesbians being there. There have been several posts related to the LGBTQ community, and I'm curious how you will support those students.
Okay. Well, specifically that in that instance, I was a very good customer at Cotton's Barbecue for a long time, which I still, it's a great place to go. But they were having some sort of an adult game night there, and I was in the habit of bringing my kids and my grandkids to these events. Well, we walked in and were not made aware that there was an adult game night, bingo or whatever it was, and they kind of rushed us out because I had two little girls in tow, and it just wasn't an appropriate atmosphere for them to be in. So my problem was with the establishment going that way. At one time, they were, well, when the owner was still alive, he died of COVID. He would invite church groups there on Sunday. So it changed.
And when you say adult, was there some connection to the LGBTQ community?
Yes. It was drag dress up night or something. I don't remember what it was exactly because we went in, saw what was going on, and got ushered out really quick because of the kids.
All right. I've got a couple of moments for a few more calls here. Peter, can you just briefly go ahead?
Yes, I'm a veteran and a father, and I support diversity and inclusion, and I fail to see what exactly is the problem with DEI. What, in your opinion, is the problem with it?
Thanks, Peter.
Well, DEI essentially boils everything down to quotas and racial quotas and not performance-based. And we saw arguably an example of that this past weekend with the president and his Secret Service detail, which, this is not a school board issue, but it reflects what we can expect from DEI initiatives.
What's the connection there?
Well, his security team was not, for one, not tall enough to protect him, and they showed some, lack of professional behavior.
What does that have to do with
That's
DEI?
just an outworking of DEI. So under the last, and I didn't want to get really in the weeds with this, but under the last hearings with the director of Secret Service, she is a proponent of DEI hires. So these people were not the best qualified for the job. They fit a quota
and
for hiring.
I got you. You're saying that people that were protecting the president were not
the best for that job. Not that they weren't great agents. They were just not the best for that job.
All right. So much to talk about. We are out of time, but there is a panel, a discussion
coming up
tomorrow
yes.
at JPEF.
JPEF.
Okay.
Right.
People can find that information on the JPEF website. Tony Ricardo, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Just ahead, a nonprofit devoted to helping human trafficking celebrates its 13th year.
Mayo Clinic, seeing the unseeable by using advanced imaging technology to improve accuracy in diagnoses and treatments. More at mayoclinic.org/Florida.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
On the next Fresh Air, John M. Chu, the director of Crazy Rich Asians, and the film adaptation of Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical In the Heights. He has a forthcoming adaptation of the musical Wicked. He'll talk about making movies and being raised by immigrant parents who owned a Chinese restaurant in Silicon Valley. Join us
today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Unexplained aerial phenomena.
Well, if there's like anything, it's rotating.
More people are asking if the U.S. government is covering up what it knows. Is the truth out there? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Our voices.
Welcome back. Formed in Jacksonville in 2012, Rethreaded is devoted to helping human trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. The nonprofit is now celebrating its 13th year. And to talk about it, I'm joined by Kristen Keene, Rethreaded's founder and CEO. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, I am glad to be here today.
Big 13.
Big 13.
That's a huge milestone.
Yeah, and we have a lot going on for year 13.
What does it mean for you personally? I mean, this is your heart and soul, something that you started from the ground up. What does it mean to reach this milestone?
It means I get to see the fruit of all this work. Like, we're a long-term program. Women stay 3 to 5 years. And now we have women who have been through our program, who have reclaimed their lives. Their kids are in school. The cycle is permanently broken. They've changed their lives, their families' lives. They're changing our community's lives. They're out in the world, being who they're created to be. And the world is better. So it means the gift and opportunity to see it deeply work.
Tell us about the challenge to that. We know that people who are in situations of trafficking can often be, victims from childhood. Their own children can be in perilous situations. And it's real difficult to break the cycle.
Yes. Yeah, we were just talking about this. Usually a woman starts with like 2 or 3 vulnerabilities that makes her vulnerability to trafficking. And then over time, once she's in trafficking, when she does try to leave, she's facing almost 72 barriers.
Wow. What are some of the ones that initially can become problematic?
Like sometimes financial situations, past trauma, and the common vulnerability that all of us have is the need to belong, right? You just happen to trust the wrong person, and they take advantage of that trust. Addiction's an issue. Mental health issues can be an issue. Normal things that when you're surrounded by a community, people can help you not fall through the cracks.
I think one fundamental misunderstanding people sometimes have about people who get into sex trafficking is assuming that it's sort of a decision that's made to become a professional sex worker, as opposed to the reality, which in many cases it starts with a relationship with someone who's exploitative.
Yes, and then the trafficker makes it normal, normalizes it, and then brings blame and shame. And then the definition of human trafficking is use of force, fraud, or coercion to perform a sex act for profit. So after time, that's when the trafficker introduces the force, the fraud, and the coercion.
So over the course of these 13 years, how many women have come through Rethreaded's program, and how many are currently part of it?
Over 85 women have come. Currently in our program, we have 18 women in the program. That's our 3 to 5 year holistic restoration program. And then on our staff, we have 5 women who've come out of the program and are now our permanent employees.
And in that 3 to 5 year window, where are they living? What are they doing for work? And what services do you provide?
So they're employed at Rethreaded, and they are employed in an area of the company where they have natural talents. So production, retail, finance, operations, wherever they're gifted at, we put them in there, and we have a need as a company. And then when they're employed, they get access to all kinds of training, care management to walk them through all those barriers, mental health services, group therapy, access to trauma specialist, and it's all paid, right? So they're on the clock for all this training. And then we give them time. It's 3 to 5 years. 2 years it takes to heal your brain at minimum from trauma. So the first 2 years is just the rebuild. Let's get some stability and heal. And then the next 3 years is like, let's build your life and build your future.
I think I always thought, and initially Rethreaded really was more focused on textiles, but now you are expanding into all kinds of realms,
Yes.
including this massive new kitchen that you're going to be unveiling. So tell us about that.
So exciting.
What are you making?
So we, about 2.5 years ago, we purchased a toffee company called Amelia Toffee from the amazing Anita. And now it is our #1 bestseller. We've been making it off-site, and now we've just finished our industrial kitchen, and now all the candy is made on site. So we're all back together. We're all home. And now we're ready to fully launch our toffee business. And I promise you, it is the best toffee you will ever eat. I promise. I can promise you that.
So when are people able to come and see this facility to celebrate the birthday? I mean, there's an event around all this,
Yes.
right?
So August 27th, this coming Saturday from 6:30 to 9, we're having our 13th birthday party. So we have a $30,000 match from Riverside Homes. Our goal is to raise $34,000, which is 1,000 hours of work and holistic services. And then we're having our kitchen grand opening. You can come and tour the kitchen, see where it's made. We're having all 9 flavors for tasting. Then we're having
Of the toffee.
Then we're having a toffee flight. So you can choose your 3 favorite toffees, and then we pair a specialty cocktail with it. And then we're revealing our new product, our new home line, which is our leather goods and our t-shirt goods. So we have new pieces for your home, new dog toys, cat toys, anything you need for your home.
Excellent. It is. It sounds like a great party, and congratulations, Kristen Keene,
Thank
on
you.
13 years. It's a huge
Thank you so
accomplishment.
much.
And that's our program. Join us tomorrow when we preview local athletes to watch for in the.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
The Cummer Museum of Art and Garden's new exhibition, Fabric of a Nation, American Quilt Stories, from the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, on view through September 29th. Visit cummermuseum.org for more information. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.